them to, but the economy and the sectors just require it. So we may at some point think about, a subcommittee, if it makes any sense, to kind of put some focus on some issues that might need specific attention. Very hard to do in a kind of a mass group like this. So we'll just, we don't have a roadmap for this either. So we'll kind of work our way through it and hopefully come up with some thoughts and ideas about how we can help one another. And employment, of course, or keeping people employed. And I tell you from my perspective, from my city perspective, and we may have some debate on this in other quarters, keeping people employed as much as humanly possible is going to be a significant feature in terms of when we can, how we are able to speed up the recovery. I am not interested in the city shooting itself in the foot by hiving off all kinds of services and people, and then having to reestablish all of that when and if all of that can come back. We need to try do everything possible to keep everyone as buoyant as possible, and totally consistent with what the federal government is doing, trying to get money into the hands of individuals and businesses to keep going, so that when the doors can open some more, that the economy can recover quickly. If we don't do that, then it'll take years and years and years. I see some noddings of heads, so we're in agreement. Okay, meeting's over. We're on. Total agreement.
How often does that happen in council?
Lately,
Funny guy.
don't make me answer that question.
Democracy's messy. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Differing opinions always generate lots of dialogue. I always strive to ensure that it isn't personal. And there are moments where that isn't always achieved, but we keep working on it.
Well, usually deliver stronger solutions too.
True. Well, you gotta thrash them out. So all the voices need to be heard, as long as they're well-meaning and focused on the issue. We should be fine. So I'm seeing it about 8:30, Lauren. 2 minutes.
Yeah, we're at 8:28.
I've got people here that are calling the signals and doing audibles while I'm here. Matt, you'll appreciate this. I've got this headset on so that I can get instructions from people on what I need to do, and they'll be waving at me frantically when I'm not doing what I need to do.
Well audible, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, if I look a little distracted, forgive me. Some staff are on the line. Maybe we could just identify them while we're here. City Manager Jeanette Smith.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Norm Schlehan, who's our Executive Director of our Economic Development Department. Norm.
Good morning, everyone.
Any other staff on the line?
Yep. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. And
sorry. Thank you, Carol.
Carol Murillo, Economic Development. Thank you.
All right. I see Carrie Brooks Joyner. Thank you, Carrie.
Good morning, sir.
Jason Thorne.
Good morning, everyone.
Planning and Development Director, Manager. And okay. All right, are we ready to go?
Yes, we are, sir.
Okay. So let me start by thanking. And I just want to do our acknowledgement of the City of Hamilton is situated on the traditional territory of the Erie, Neutral, Huron, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga. The land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which has an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase 1792 between the Crown and the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation. Today, the City of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our role as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. If you want to refer to them later, you certainly can. And I'm going to do a quick roll call, just in terms of identifying everyone that's here on behalf of the public who may not see full screen. So, and for our attendance record as well. So I will start with our councilors. Councilors Nan, if you would indicate your presence, please.
Present.
Thank you. Councilor Danko. I see you, or I saw you. Thank you. Councilor Whitehead. Matt Affinak.
Present.
Thank you. Florencia Bernstein.
Present.
Thank you, Florencia. Ronald Brown. Not as yet. You can go back. Thank you. Kelly Duffin. I did see you. Yeah, thank you, Kelly. Aaron Dunham. Okay, Mark Elliker. Patty Hall.
Present.
Thank you, Patty. Carrie Jarvie.
Present.
Terry Johns.
Present.
Thank you. Lisa LaRocca.
Present.
Thank you. Keenan Loomis.
Present.
Keenan, I see you. Brian Lovers.
Present.
Anthony Marco.
Present.
Ron McCann.
Rob McCann, present.
Rob. Did I say Rob? Ron McCurley. I got them mixed up. I saw you earlier, Ron. Thank you. Kim Martin. Thank you, Kim. Bob Monroe.
Present.
Thank you. Matteo Patricelli.
Present.
Kathy Puckering.
Present.
Kathy, I see you. Okay. Ty Chaddock.
Present.
Thank you. And Drew Spoelstra. Online. Thank you, Judy. Judy Travis.
Present.
Welcome, Judy. Henry Weigel.
Present.
Thank you. And Guy Uwatong.
Present.
Thank you. Thank you all for your presence here today. And I think we might do an around the table quick introduction of each other. But so I read out the names, but certainly not the organizations that you're attached to. So I'll manage to do that in a moment. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda, please?
There are no changes, Mr. Mayor, but if I may have a moment, we have 3 callers that have called into this morning's meeting. I understand that Drew Spolstra has called in. May I ask that the other 2 callers who have called into today's meeting please identify themselves?
Hi, Greg Crone here from the mayor's office.
Oh, okay, Greg. Thank you very much.
And Michelle Johnson from the mayor's office.
Oh, thank you very much. That's great. Thank you. No changes to the agenda, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. So can I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Or approve the agenda? Sorry, it wasn't amended. Moved by Narinder, seconded by Keenan. Peacefully, thank you. All in favor? Show of hands is fine. Thank you very much. Sorry? Sorry? I did, and I saw them all. I did. Yeah, they're quick. Yeah, thank you. Any declarations of interest? So not sure that there's any conflict opportunity. Sorry? I'm coming to that. Yeah, I'll take declarations of interest if there are any. Thank you. And then we'll turn to, and I didn't see any, so we'll turn to the first order of business, which is to appoint a chair and a vice chair. And I've had lots to do. I'm going to chair this meeting just because of the way this structure is set up. It's hard to flip it over into another construct. And so I understand that there's a potential nomination. I see Keenan. Yes, go ahead, Keenan.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everybody. I would like to nominate Ron McCurley to be the chair of this task force. I think he offers the perfect mix of private sector, government, and institutional experience. I also think that given Mohawk's position in providing labor and workforce to a variety of interests here at the table, he comes at this from an ideal perspective and can be rather ecumenical in his judgment. And finally, and most importantly, to all of us here, you and I served with him on as chair of your task force on workforce development, and he knows how to run a good meeting.
Ecumenical sounds biblical, so I don't know, didn't know you were a caller at one point, but I couldn't agree more in terms of your assessment of that. I'd be happy to second that. Anyone else would like to second that?
I'll second that.
Okay, Patty, thank you. Patty Hall seconded that. Any comments or questions or any other nominations? Anthony Marco. Anthony?
Just because from a democratic perspective, I have an issue with not knowing everybody on this call. For the purposes of voting, I'd like to in advance note my abstention so it doesn't pass by. Nothing against anybody who's been nominated. I just don't know a lot of people on this call. And so I'm just not comfortable voting for or against anybody in that respect. So I will be abstaining from this vote unless we would have it at a later time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nomination's been made, so if there are no additional nominations, Ron, did you accept that as a?
I would accept the nomination. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any other issues? If not, we can go to a vote on that. Sorry? Well, you can let them know. You want to go ahead.
It's Lorraine Kolar here. Anthony, we don't permit abstention here at the city, so you're either going to have to vote yes or no, or in favor or opposed.
Well,
So you've not heard of Ron McCurley?
I think the point is I don't know everybody else, so I wouldn't know whether anybody else would possibly potentially make a good chair or vice chair. So technically, if I choose not to vote or not to raise my hand, you might not record it as an abstention, but I don't know what the difference would be from a technical perspective if I just chose not to raise my hand. I understand it won't be recorded, but.
Yep. Anthony, if you choose not to raise your hand, I will record it as in the negative.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So there's a nomination on the floor. So moved and seconded. Any dissent? If not, I'll call the vote on that. All in favor of Ron McCurley? Just by a show of hands. Thank you. Thank you very much. That is certainly a majority of the hands that I see there, and we'll leave it at that. So, and the next item of business is vice chair, and I'm open to nominations on vice chair as well.
Mr. Mayor, I there's some great choices here, but I would like to nominate Terry Johns as vice chair for the task force.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Keenan? Seconding that? Yes, thank you. Judy Travis. Judy, do you want to speak? Go ahead, Judy. Forgive us, Judy, we're not hearing you, so I'm not sure where we're going to go with that. Something's amiss in terms of your
No, I
audio.
have nothing to say. No.
Sorry?
I have no problem.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other nominations for vice chair for this task force? Okay, somebody move that we close that nomination. Moved and seconded by Keenan and Mr. Danko. All in favor to close that. And all in favor of Terry Johns being vice chair of the task force, please indicate. Okay, I see a majority of hands. Okay, thank you. Some things that we've already done. I'm getting the signals from for our audible callers here. Kathy Puckering. Kathy, you have a comment?
No, I'm good, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Declarations of interest. I think we covered. No one had any declarations of interest. So we're going to turn to staff presentation. So Jeanette Smith is on the line. Thought we'd kind of start with kind of an overview of our city and where we're at. And what we're focusing on as a corporation, and then some of the things that we may have done to help business as it is today. So I'm going to turn it over to our city manager, Jeanette Smith. Jeanette, you could walk us through your presentation. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I think Norm is going to bring it up on screen for me because we are going to move right from mine into his.
Okay.
Hearing nothing. I'm assuming he's doing it, so maybe I'll get.
Yeah, we're in the process of trying to get that up.
It's coming forward.
Okay.
It's happening from the council chamber.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
In the meantime, Jeanette, why don't you just
I'll get going here.
Thank you,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First and foremost, welcome everyone to the first meeting of the Mayor's Task Force on Economic Recovery. We'd really like to thank all of you for agreeing to participate and dedicating your time to position Hamilton's economy to rebound from COVID, not just for the short term, but for the long-term recovery as well. I know as staff, we're very much looking forward to hearing your insights and feedback from your respective organizations, companies, and sectors as well. So the mission that you have signed up for today and for the next few weeks, next slide, is really about providing multi-sectoral leadership. It is a large group, as the mayor mentioned, but that's been done deliberately as well. To ensure we have a strong, healthy economy in the city, there's no one sector that is key. We know we have the most diverse economy according to organizations across the country. So we really needed your multi-sectoral leadership and direction to guide Hamilton's economic recovery in the immediate aftermath of COVID. As you're aware, COVID-19 has changed the city, residents, and businesses. It's changed how we've lived our lives personally and how we do business in the city. And collectively, we really do need to position our city and economy to ensure Hamilton can rebound in a long-term, sustainable, and equitable manner. Next slide. In terms of the mandate of the task force, this group will be developing an action-driven plan with some concrete deliverables. We want to have those deliverables to have defined outcomes. We want to identify some priority items that reflect the issues that Hamilton's business community is facing. And we all know there's a lot of uncertainties right now, but collectively, we'll combine all of our knowledge and understanding of the current economic climate from our various perspectives and plan accordingly. And what we'll be doing is pulling together recommendations that may be directed to other levels of government, to our own city council, or just actions collectively that our various sectors want to take. Next slide. Just briefly, the governance model. I'm on the task force as the sponsor, so my role is to ensure that there's staff and resources available and in place to support the task force and chair and vice chair to meet the deliverables of the plan. And that plan with its deliverables will go back to council at a future date. And the last slide I'll spend a few minutes is really just kind of where we've been and where we're going. I don't think any of us really could imagine we'd end up where we are right now. My early career was in public health, and we always talked about a pandemic coming again, but I don't think we ever actually envisioned it to look like this and how impactful it could be. In phase one, certainly actions were really executed based on public health advice, both provincially, nationally, and locally. And we also had provincial orders that we had to react to. And we set up the Emergency Operations Center at the city back on March 12th and started taking those actions. And we do know with the provincial orders and the medical officer of health advice, our business community, like many across the country, were basically shut down. I was talking to Ron McCurley earlier about how quickly Mohawk and McMaster as well had to pivot to all of a sudden go online. And what we've seen is some amazing resiliency will set us up for success in the future in terms of companies that have pivoted. They've changed their manufacturing to produce PPE. They've come up with innovative ways to all of a sudden become takeout establishments when they weren't takeout before. And the community also stepped up to support those businesses so they could continue to maintain some level of businesses. But let's be clear, we know there's a lot of businesses that are struggling, especially those that weren't deemed essential and had to shut down. So that brings us to, moving into phase 2, where both the province and the city do have a reopening plan, but it's one of those interesting plans where we actually have no dates on when different parts of the plan are going to be open. There's been some discussion now that some of the opening might be a bit on a regional level in Ontario because of the different COVID numbers, particularly in the GTHA versus other parts of the province, but we're not quite sure what that will take. So some things we're masters of our own destiny and some things will have to react to provincial orders and in their timelines. And then moving into phase 3, which really is our recovery, and that really is about the work of this task force. And what I will say is, this city has a history of innovation. It's a city that has a history of hard work and tackling challenges. I think we're pretty stubborn. And the city also pulls together when it has to move forward. And so, it's our hope and expectations that having this diverse group of voices around the table, we're going to build up a plan with some concrete deliverables that will support our business communities in the short term, but set us up for the long-term recovery post-COVID. It's not going to be easy because as we reopen, we're still going to have to put a lot of those public health measures in place, physical distancing, masks if you can't, all the hygiene practices. So reopening doesn't mean reopening to the exact way we were doing things before, and that's going to bring challenges to our business community as well. So thank you very much again for donating your time and energy to this. We're very excited as staff to support your work and look forward to working with you in the weeks ahead. And I'll pass it over to Norm.
Thank you.
Actually, you're going to pass it over to me. It's Carrie Brooks Joyner.
Sorry, Carrie.
No problem. So as Jeanette mentioned, the word that has come out of the pandemic is pivot, and we've already heard that several times this morning. And very quickly, city staff, with the approval of the Emergency Operations Committee, started the pivoting of programs and services across the corporation. And among those efforts included support to business. And although not previously presented as a public document, the immediate response plan and its framework of 6 streams, which is on the screen in front of you, became a useful way to talk about how the city was responding and to informally track internal initiatives. Next slide, please. So communication and the sharing of information was clearly the immediate critical priority. And I'm not going to review the bullets on all the slides. I'm just going to hit the highlights. But the creation of the microsite on March 19th in collaboration with the 3 chambers was among the earliest visible supports to the business community. And the mayor, the city manager, general manager of Planning and Economic Development and the Director of Economic Development were all guests on the Hamilton Chamber video series as early as March 24th, and over the following weeks made timely information of sharing. The city was also conscious to provide specific sector information, such as to artists and musicians, and the city continues to share information, but of course now available resources from multiple sources are available now in much more quantity than in those very early days and weeks of the pandemic. Next slide. It quickly became apparent that COVID was having a devastating financial impact on business, and that's no surprise to everyone on the call. And the city provided property tax assistance and waiving of late fees as very early response. And last week, Council approved operating grants within the City Enrichment Fund and shared an upcoming phased review to project grants. Next slide. So back to that word pivot. So effort and a good dose of creativity were essential to keep city services and processes moving. And amazingly, a lot of it was seamless to the public and to our clients. And the new initiative, Who's Hiring in Hamilton During COVID-19, is a collaboration between the Workforce Planning Hamilton and the Economic Development Division, which matches job seekers with immediate employment opportunities, was announced in early May. Next slide, please. Again, the word pivot is appropriate as service modifications were quickly put in place. Approval for outdoor dining districts in the York Boulevard Parkade as an open-air performance space were very recent pivots in response to the physical distancing restrictions. Also in this bucket of activity was the shifting of multiple planned in-person experiences to online experiences so that they could continue. Next slide. And the last two buckets. The city also played an immediate seed and catalyst role, which resulted in the support of the very early online performance series called Hamilton Shows Up, and a new venture which provided one-on-one business mentoring for musicians that was very popular. And our social engagement channels were very consciously used to share information and content. So there were multiple immediate responses that were of particular interest to the business community. And I'm going to pass it over to Norm to present the results of the survey to business on the impacts of COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Norm?
Thank you, Carrie, and good morning, Mr. Mayor and task force members. This morning, I'm going to take you through a brief presentation that was shared with Council on May the 13th on the results of a COVID business impact survey that was conducted in mid to late April of this year. And while there have been many surveys that have been conducted and continue being conducted on the impact of COVID, both provincially and nationally, this was the first local survey on economic impact specifically for the City of Hamilton. The survey has been a very useful document in identifying the key pain points within our community, within our business sectors, which in turn helps shape the mandate and the membership of the Mayor's Task Force on Economic Recovery that you're sitting on here today. Next slide, please.
We've had a staff switch positions here. One second, we'll get the right click.
That's actually the slide that will follow my formal presentation. We're just going to load up the other piece here.
I found that WebEx and Zoom meetings always.
But while we're waiting, I'll just let you know that in collaboration with the Flamborough, Hamilton, and Stony Creek Chambers of Commerce, Workforce Planning Hamilton, and all of our 13 business improvement areas, our division, the Economic Development Division, developed and launched a business impact survey to get a better idea on the effects of COVID on our community. The survey was launched on April the 15th and closed at 11:59 p.m. on April 29th. It provided us with a great snapshot of the state of our economy during that 9-day period. Next slide, please. We got great response to the survey, over 1,040 qualified responses. The response was considered qualified if the respondent accepted the terms and conditions of the survey. They completed the questions that they identified their industry and their revenue impact on their business, and that only one response will be permitted from each local business. And while, a concerted effort was taken to promote participation and get this information out, I should stress that the Business Impact Survey did not pursue academic standards and methodologies. So although we think we've got a fairly representative sample here, it should not be considered to be scientifically representative. Some of the key findings across the survey: businesses in all industry sectors have been affected by COVID, which should be no surprise. The aggregated employment impact from the respondents who participated, which was around over 35,000 employees, communicated an employment decrease of almost 13,000 jobs from March the 1st. And 35,000 employees, just to give you a context there, represents about 16% of the total number of jobs as identified in the City of Hamilton's 2019 employment survey. So we got a decent sample size in that regard. Over 90% of respondents reported a decrease in revenue because of COVID, with over 50% of the respondents indicating that the decrease in revenue was greater than 50% when compared to the month prior. And lastly, 65% of the respondents indicated they have reduced their employment levels, with over 20% reporting they had 0 employees at the time they responded, which equates to about 200 companies, 200 businesses. This is a very interesting slide. It's related to the respondents to the survey. The black bars are the business sizes. So, and then the red line that is going down indicates the composition of actual business sizes in the City of Hamilton. And as you can follow that red line down the black bars, it would indicate that we have achieved a fairly representative sample from the larger business community. In terms of distribution across the business sectors, the survey results show a very good mix from large traditional businesses and a vast collection of small and cultural-based businesses as well. So again, we feel this provides greater sectoral significance to our results. And then over half of the respondents who self-reported they were an essential business as based on the guidelines by the province of Ontario. So, and once again, these were early days in the essential services piece. If you go back, we're in mid to late April. That list would look a lot differently now, and survey would probably would answer a bit differently now if current guidelines were in place. And here's breaking down by the impact on revenue. As I stated earlier, one of the overall findings was over 90% of the respondents reported a decrease in revenue, and over 50% reported revenue decreases of over 50%. That's that long red line at the bottom of the graph. Businesses that answered this question also indicated that they were facing material risks with cash flow, quality of their accounts receivables, and status of upcoming purchase agreements. Again, not a huge surprise, but I think we're just demonstrating this has had a huge impact on this sample size within the survey. This is probably one of the most telling charts within the entire survey. It highlights the reported impact on revenue compared to March 1st by industry category. The total row, we've put it's somewhere in the middle of the chart. That's that red row that goes around right about the middle. It represents all relevant data aggregated across all industry categories. The total row has been ranked along with all the other business categories by the percentage of companies reporting decreases in revenue of more than 50%. So the red row represents the average or mean, with all industries listed above it having reported a higher than average total. By illustrating the chart this way, it really isolates those industries that are most affected from a revenue perspective. And it probably comes as no surprise to you that personal services, tourism, restaurants have had higher than average negative impacts on their revenues. By comparison, 64% of the respondents reported a decrease in employment compared to the previous month. You will recall from a previous slide that 90% had reported a decrease in revenue, so it appears there's been a greater impact on revenue than employment. This slide now highlights the employment compared to March 1st by industry category. The total row has been ranked along with all the other businesses categories by the percentage of companies reporting decreases in employment of 100% from highest to lowest. Once again, the red row demonstrates the average, and we've isolated the industries, many that were the same from the previous previous slide on the decrease in revenues, so that should be no surprise. But the most telling stat on this page is that on average, almost 230 companies reduced their employment by 100%. A few more notes on the impact on employment. One of the overall findings, as we indicated, was that the cumulative employment levels of all respondents was over 35,000. Overall, the responding businesses reported a total cumulative decrease of almost 13,000 jobs. That was mentioned in the key finding slide earlier, but business with over 100 employees represent almost 9,000 of the total jobs lost in that period, or almost 70%. Next slide, please. So this chart speaks to decrease in employment levels by business size. The red line indicates the average decrease in employment of 35.8%. Looking closely, the small businesses, so the first three black bars coming from the left, those with under 20 employees have seen the largest percentage decrease in employment levels compared to levels they had reporting on March the 1st, with businesses in the 5 to 9 employee range reporting an almost 50% decrease. You'll also note that there are a few businesses with 500 or more employees that reported decreases above the average as well. Businesses that reported being covered under the essential service designation experienced a significantly reduced impact on their employment levels as compared to similar sized businesses identified as not being covered under the essential service designation. And the largest degree of difference here can be seen in the 200 to 199 employee category. And at the time of the survey, the majority of businesses that responded said they had already started implementing a number of measures due to COVID-19, including working remotely, decreasing their staff hours, and laying off staff. Close to half the respondents indicated that they were attempting or considering a material change in their product/service delivery, or a pivot into a new product service direction to meet new business demands. And just a little bit about the leading information channels. When we thought it was important to figure out where our businesses were getting their information. And although news about the pandemic was consumed by a variety of mediums, Canadian television media and was the most frequent response, with over 2/3 respondents identifying that media channel. And I think it's just very interesting with the focus and rise on social media. And at a time of crisis, traditional media still seems to be the go-to avenue for citizens, that being television, radio, and newspaper. Oh, this survey has been edited down a little from the one that was presented to council. We did ask within the survey their awareness of certain programs, initiatives. So we asked them, did they know about the COVID-19 chamber website? Did they know about the hometown hub? We also asked them about their awareness of the tax assistance program. And this was a little bit of a surprise. And although the program had only been out for about 10 days when the survey went out, over half the respondents were not aware of the property tax assistance program. So I believe there's an opportunity for us to do a better job in putting that communication out through our channels, such as the task force today, for some of the future initiatives that'll be coming forward. And the last slide is future survey participation. Well over 50%, wide majority indicated a willingness to participate in follow-up surveys. And this is very good to know because as we don't know, and we don't believe this will be the last opportunity to survey our business community. The employment and revenue impacts will continue to change as our economy reopens, and we'll need to continue to take the pulse of the business community to ensure that no one gets left behind. So that's it in a very brief presentation. I hope my audio was better this time, Mr. Mayor, than it was at council.
It definitely was, Norm. Thank you. And the visual is what it is.
Wow.
You know what? If you sat in this room watching the images that come on this screen, this is billboard side. My face up here scares me. And unfortunately, that also projects everybody else on the screen as well. And you're all looking fantastic. Could I have, before we kind of dig into some comments, could I have a motion to receive both of those presentations so we can get that out of the way? Moved by Anthony Marco, seconded by Chair McCurley. All in favor, just a show of hands. Thank you. And so I think this is an appropriate time to kind of go around the room and first of all, maybe everyone introduce themselves. And, you know, this is not intended to be a staff-driven, city-driven task force. This is really all about getting input from you about what we can either do or advocate for that can help with recovery in the first place. So I'm going to turn the first opportunity over to our newly appointed chair, Mr. McCurley. Thank you, Rod, for stepping up and doing this. And I could echo Keenan's comments. And we had a skills shortage task force that ran for a couple of years and had some great outcomes. And actually, the province of Ontario stole some of our great work and made it their own, and then translated that into kind of a broader view of what should happen in Ontario. So a lot of great work was done there, Ron. You did a terrific job there, and thank you for taking this one on as well. Ron?
Well, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to take on this role as chair, and I look forward to supporting the task force and the work that they do in that way. My background, the last 6 years, I've been the president of Mohawk College and the Mohawk College Foundation. Prior to that, though, the bulk of my time has actually been spent in the private sector, in financial services, with Bank of Montreal for 20 years, with telecommunications, with Rogers Communications. I did go into government, in the provincial government, as the corporate CIO for the province of Ontario, and then deputy minister of a number of portfolios, including government services. And for my sins in government, I got to fix Orange Air Ambulance when it went into crisis. So I got to run both an airline and a hospital for a period of time as well. Looking forward to, as I mentioned, dealing with what has become, I guess, the crisis of the century for all of us, and certainly has impacted the college. We have had to lay off staff. We had to not renew contracts for some faculty, and so we're on a recovery path like everybody else is. So maybe I'll just stop there, Mr. Mayor, unless there's any questions.
Okay. I mean, thoughts and ideas about recovery we can save for another day, but certainly appreciate the introduction. So I'll turn it over to our newly nominated vice chair, Terry Johns. Thank you, Terry, for being willing to do this as well, and maybe some of your introduction and maybe some thoughts that you might have on the recovery at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good morning to everyone. Happy to represent as vice chair today to the committee. My background, I'm actually an urban planner by trade. I've been working in the industry in the private sector for more years than I care to admit today. At this time today, on the task force, I'm representing our local home builders association, the West End Hamilton Home Builders, a critical economic driver to Hamilton and the economy. And we are very interested in ensuring that Hamilton moves forward in a positive way. And a lot of what you'll hear me talk about are processes. Process to us is critical. I also am a small business owner and employer. So I have some interest in terms of economic for Hamilton moving forward. And just as an aside, I also sit on the board of the YWCA Hamilton, so you may hear me have some interest on the social side as well. So lots of interest as a Hamiltonian to keep us moving forward with practical solutions. It is about deliverables and about how we can keep this moving forward, not just conversation, but actual actions, and to keep it going. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Terry. Could I also ask Terry, so your industry, I mean, understanding from planning that planning applications are moving forward. Lots of work is in the queue in terms of development applications. Obviously, you're in that space. What are you seeing in the industry? Are you fully employed right now, keeping people employed, filing these applications, or where are you at?
Well, I did make some changes with losing some junior staff right at the beginning. We've been working remotely actually very well since March 16th. We hit the ground running and very much focused on keeping projects moving forward. But we did hit the wall when we're not able to have planning committee of adjustment and public meetings. It is a bit of an issue. So we're all working together in how we can use other venues to ensure that we are collecting public opinion. It is important to us on all of our applications. I'm happy to report it looks like Hamilton is focusing as we've requested in terms of moving forward with committee of adjustment applications as well as planning committee. I'm very happy. That is, as of this week, I'm hearing some movement. So you'll see some good comments from us on that. We are the overuse statement. We're all in this together, and we are trying to work forward with new virtual meetings to make sure all the voices are heard.
Thank you. And we've been working on getting these committees up and running, but the complexity of it in terms of public delegations and the Planning Act requirements made it particularly difficult to sort through how these decisions could be made and not be forever challenged, which is obviously a part of the function of the Planning Act and the planning process is that it's public and allows for particular processes to be challenged. And so how do we do that given the current constraints that virtual meetings have? So we've been working on this for the better part of a month and a half, quite frankly, as to how do we do this. So we're very happy because there's a significant backlog in the planning side and even more significant on the Committee of Adjustment variance side.
Yeah.
So hundreds of potential projects held up right now because they haven't been able to meet and deal with these. So fully understand. We got it quite a while ago and we're on it. So hopefully within the next few weeks we can get this thing moving again. Thank you, Terry. I'm going to go alphabetically now on the list that I have. So I'm Matt Afanek. Matt, President and CEO of the Hamilton Tiger Cats Forge FC. Obviously, sports isn't happening. What's going on in your world, and any thoughts at this moment on where things are going?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the invitation to join, and thank you to my colleagues on the call for as well making the time to make a contribution. Listen, my background is in the business side of sports entertainment. I'm in 18 years now operating from events and concerts and sporting events. So my purview to this is beyond the scope of just football and soccer, and obviously connections through that network are frankly the same everywhere, which is it's an incredibly challenging time for people who run businesses and generate revenue that are tied to gathering audiences, and whether that's music or sports or anything in between, we all face the same challenge. In our particular case, there's a certain element of being legislated out of business, right? And while we talk about industries that have been severely impacted, and I'm not sure there's many, if any, that haven't been impacted at all. But when you look at ours, it's almost absolute, right? And when the value proposition of your business is to bring people together, and you're just not fundamentally able to do that, it's really 100 to 0 overnight. One of the challenges we face is like many, that there's just no clear end in sight. And as if we were in a position to be planning towards a specific date or a specific, window of time in the calendar, then that might provide us a greater clarity. The reality is, as this has gone on, it's become clearer and clearer that that's not likely in our immediate future of our ability to project that far ahead. So with that comes, the need to be more fluid and kind of respond to the environment that seems to be our reality for the foreseeable future. I'll also say that one thing in our business that I suspect my colleagues on this task force would have also experienced in their own way. For us, it's been, this adaptation to decisions made that have profound impact on our businesses that we have no control and or involvement in making. So what I mean by that is probably the easiest example in our world is municipalities and or provinces making decisions about large gatherings and how people will come together, that are obviously made for the right reasons, and nothing trumps public health in terms of importance. But as an industry and as a business, we have no voice in those. So having to respond to those in the moment has been a learning for us as a business and us as an industry, saying, we're trying to make our own decisions, and then, decisions are made outside of our control. For us, you tackle two things: the competitive side of how we have to look at our games, both soccer and football, and frankly, event organizing. As you know, we're on the cusp of a 30,000 person concert at Tim Hortons Field with the Arkells and working with Live Nation. So it's not just music, not just sports, but it's music as well. Our business side, the compelling and changing world of the consumer value proposition that comes from how do you deliver that value if people can't come together. So as we look forward, I think there's lots of, despite these challenges, things to signal optimism. I think you have a resilient community in sports entertainment in our city, and the people involved. And I put all of that in, whether it's music, art, entertainment, culture. It's a resilient group of people that are committed to find a path forward, and as you know, time basis, our industry employs thousands and thousands and thousands of people on a part-time basis, in terms of service and service provision to support these events. And these are all not just, as we said, professional level events. These are community events and things that are at the pulse of what we're doing. So that community gives me support, or gives me optimism, given the nature of the people that work within it. And to make it very specific to what we do, I think a great sign for optimism and perhaps a forum for this committee to address is for those that aren't close to it, we obviously postponed the summer season of the CFL a couple of weeks ago for obvious reason. That creates a great hub at Tim Hortons Field that we're all proud of our venue, our city venue, about what role can that serve, and even in the near term of doing things to bring our community together, knowing there won't be mass gatherings, sporting events there for certainly over the summer months. But even more than that, as we look forward, that Hamilton will remain the host of the 2021 Grey Cup. And how can that be a catalyst? For those that don't know, Saskatchewan was postponed this year, pushed to 2022 in pushed to 2022, and 21 will remain here in Hamilton. So looking at that as Canada's largest annual sporting event to happen for its next occurrence in our city in 2021, how do we make that more than, and how will it be more than just a weekend event? And it can be a catalyst in that kind of third wave of recovery that Jeanette alluded to. So, sorry for being maybe a little bit longer than anyone else, but just wanted to kind of frame up of where we're looking at it, and happy to serve and provide any value we can in this forum.
Thank you, Matt. No, I appreciate the insight. And I think we've all struggled with frustrations about announcements that we didn't know were coming and suddenly landed on us. We're having exactly the same at the city, and I'm pretty sure all of us are kind of in this kind of constantly looking, what's the next announcement going to be, and how's that going to impact me, and having to pivot and pivot and pivot. So I think we're all in that boat. I think, but certainly miss the entertainment, like I think all of us, the entertainment venues, the great gatherings, the football games, the hockey games, the soccer games, and or concerts. God, I wish I could say they're all happening this year, but unfortunately, it's lamentable. But here we are. So how do we make something good out of the situation that we're in that still gives us that sense of coming together? I think that's going to be important. So I appreciate the comments. I'm going to turn to Florencia Bernstein, the Executive Director of Workers' Arts and Heritage Center. Florencia?
Good morning, and thank you. And I'm happy to be on this committee. Thank you for the invite. I am the Executive Director of the Workers' Arts and Heritage Center.
So your audio is kind of breaking up, so your microphone may not be close enough to you. Try that.
Let me try that again. Is that better?
That is better, much better. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just saying that I am the Executive Director of the Workers' Arts and Heritage Center, which we like to often refer to it as WAC. So if I say WAC, that's the acronym. We are a community museum dedicated to labor history and contemporary labor issues through artists and arts. We are also celebrating our 25th anniversary this year and are the stewards of Hamilton's historic Custom House down on Stewart Street. I have about 25 years experience of working in the nonprofit arts and culture sector, working with artists and with the community in deep collaboration. And I am happy to be here to represent the arts and culture sector. Much like sporting events, we are all shuttered and experiencing that impact. So I'll leave it at that, and I look forward to getting to know everybody over the next little while.
Great, thank you, Florencia. Appreciate that, and happy anniversary. As much as we're not maybe celebrating the way we'd like to, but we can still find a way of respecting and reflecting on that 25-year history. I recall being around when we actually set up the Workers' Arts and Heritage Center, which was a great, I think, great positive in our community. So it's functioned extremely well over the years, and we certainly want it to continue. I'm going to go to Rondalyn Brown, manager of the Westfield Heritage Village. Another employment opportunity as well as a great feature in our city. Rondalyn?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So I'm in my 40th year of working at Westfield Heritage Village, and we're owned by the Hamilton Region Conservation Authority, and we're a heritage village, and we were just in the process of transitioning into a conservation area, and so we've been able to reopen for passive use, people wanting to come up and hike through and use the trails and enjoy the nature, which is a great stress reliever, and walking. The challenges with the village itself are much greater. Small buildings and large events, a lot of people. So that's going to be a real challenge in figuring out how we can move forward with that. Some of our big events, such as Telling Tales, is going completely virtual this year. So there's a lot, there is opportunity for looking at new ways of doing things, online presence, things that can be done in a different way. And I think this year it will be sort of all a new normal, as everyone here keeps saying. I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to be on this task force, because I think that collaboration and communication will be our the greatest strengths for us to work through this times. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Couldn't agree more with that. Thank you, Rondalyn. Kelly Duffin, President and CEO of Amity Goodwill. Good morning, Kelly. And
good morning, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everyone. So I just introduced myself. I worked in the private sector for about 15 years, mostly in the arts and culture, including launching and running the Giller Prize for 6 years, which was an amazing privilege. 15 years ago, I switched to not-for-profit, and I've headed 5 not-for-profits in a range of sectors. So I kind of bring those lenses to it. I headed the Alzheimer's Society of Canada, so healthcare, Canadian Hearing Society, so disability and social services, and most recently the Supply Chain Association of Ontario, so a professional association, and also with a focus on supply chain, which we've heard more about now than we ever have. I've been with Goodwill Amity 2.5 years now, and we are essentially an employment service provider. Goodwill's mission is changing lives through the power of work. So we work with employers and with job seekers to bring them together. Very involved in the labor market and workforce, so really pleased to be on this task force. We also work with many vulnerable people, barriers to employment, whether that's disability, justice system, youth, newcomers, lower income, detached from the labor market, et cetera. And I think we've really seen through this COVID crisis a disproportionate impact on those populations. So when we talk about recovery and making sure that they have a voice and come through the recovery as well will be very important. For us, it's had a significant impact on operations. We run social enterprises, you might know our thrift stores, and obviously they were not considered as an essential service. So we were, in Norm's charts, we would have been one of the employers that laid off over 50% of our staff. When we got the announcement that they would close tomorrow, we did have to close tomorrow, and we laid off 44 people. On the employment service side of what we do, that was considered an essential service, but we did have to pivot to working remotely and providing service remotely. So nobody could come into our career centers anymore. We couldn't offer in-person workshops. All of that has had to move to online. We've also, one of our social enterprises is catering. And one of the perhaps silver linings of this is that we've pursued and received some funding to transition from sort of selling that catering to providing meals to people in need in the community at this time. So starting next week for 4 weeks, we'll be providing 2,000 meals to people in need in Hamilton using our social enterprises. So that's a bit of a pivot for us. But social services overall, so if I think about the sector and turn to the recovery part of this conversation, the social service and the not-for-profit sector are really on the front lines in many cases. And I think of us as the first responders in many cases, and in other cases, the second responders. So employment services right now, we've been working with essential employers who are screaming for staff, but otherwise it has been quite quiet. We know on the other side of this, unemployment is going to be higher, and we'll have some heavy lifting to do to get people back to work. Yeah, the sector also relies on fundraising. So similar to sports and entertainment, it can be very reliant on events, which obviously have all been canceled. And as I say, social enterprise in cases like ours, which have been shuttered now for 8 or 9 weeks and are gradually reopening at much lower volumes than before. So the recovery for the sector will really be about people, employment, being able to serve the community and managing revenues with the declines in fundraising and social enterprise revenues. And very pleased to serve.
Thank you, Kelly. And obviously, great work done by Goodwill Amity. In normal circumstances, how many people do you employ?
About 80.
Right. So when you add up all the kind of not-for-profit sectors, there's a huge amount of employment, not only service, but I mean, in terms of employment and employability, it's a huge sector that employs a lot of people, that obviously provides good service for many, many needy people in our community. So thank you for your good work, and hopefully we can get back to that higher employment number and getting back to some sense of normalcy somewhere down the road. But we all live in that world of uncertainty of when might that happen? And I think I don't know that anyone has that specific answer just yet. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Aaron Dunham, I did not hear on the call earlier. Aaron, are you on the call? Aaron is the owner of the Other Bird, runs a number of restaurants and facilities in our community. I don't recall you being on the line. So I'll go to Mark Elliker, which I wasn't sure he was available either. Mark, are you on the line? Mark is the business manager of the Hamilton Brantford Building and Construction Trades Council, an active participant in the skills shortage effort that we did previously. We'll hear from Mark another time. Patty Hall, Executive Director of the Stony Creek Chamber of Commerce. I see you there, Patty. Or I saw you there, Patty. Are you on the line, Patty? Okay. We'll get back to Patty a little later, having some computer issues. Carrie Jarvie, Executive Director of the Downtown Hamilton BIA. Carrie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning. Thank you. I guess I'm the Executive Director of the Downtown Hamilton Business Improvement Area, but I am representing the 13 BIAs in the city of Hamilton. Our 13 BIAs represent multiple sectors of our economy, from retail, a variety of retail, hospitality, personal services, and professional services. We've really seen the resiliency of small business in our sectors with lots of challenges. We've really seen the importance of neighborhoods and how your BIAs actually can really be supportive of a neighborhood. And we are really happy to be a part of this task force and look forward to working with this great group of people to really help move all of our businesses forward.
Great, thank you very much, Ken. Our BIAs again employ a lot of people if they're up and running, and certainly many of your locations are shuttered at the moment. But very important sector in terms of all of our downtowns, or all of our business improvement areas that are looking good, but not particularly open. I do take some pride in the fact that we're continuing on with making our city look good in terms of the flowers in the islands. And some might argue, well, you can't eat those. Well, no, you can't eat them, but they are a representation of our caring about our city that I think is now more than ever an important feature of making sure that we provide some sense of normalcy. So the Gore Park fountain is going to be started if it hasn't started already, and we're going to try and keep the flowers in the islands and kind of can keep building that sense of normalcy and pride in our community that hopefully will lead us into the BIAs getting back up and running and flourishing as they have in the past. So thank you for your good work.
Thank you.
Lisa LaRocca, Director of Operations, Sonic Union Records. Lisa?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I've worked with Sonic Onion for 10 years now, which also organizes or manages the Supercrawl Festival. I also sit on the Hamilton Music Advisory Team and the Arts Advisory Commission. So I'm representing those groups as well. Just quick things I wanted to highlight about the music industry. Has obviously been hit from many different angles. Festival circuit is closed, venues are closed, and musicians are out of work. So it's very important that we support provincial, federal, and city funding. Continue to music and all arts organizations right now, not just for costs incurred, but also so the organizations can survive, pay administrative costs and their staff. When venues open, they will likely be the last to open and at limited capacities. So it'll be important to support the venues. We've already had additional spaces in Hamilton, such as the York Parkade, offered up for promoters, which is excellent. And there's been other initiatives from other cities, such as cuts in property taxes for venue owners and property owners, which would help. I think we also need to recognize that not just musicians have lost their jobs, but there's a greater industry that has been affected, such as production, suppliers, tech, which have been greatly affected and need support as well. And the support for musicians for online shows goes a long way as well. And lastly, festivals, when they are able to resume, will likely need support for new requirements with health and safety. Number of washrooms, hand washing units. If there is physical distancing that has to happen for large events, they will need a great deal of support, making sure that they can do that in a large setting.
Yep. Thank you, Lisa. And certainly, I'm going to miss Supercrawl. Do you have an alternate plan for Supercrawl this year? Are you working on something that might present some entertainment but not gather people on James Street North?
Yes, we're working on announcing that this week, actually. The decision and discussion is happening with our board, and we will announce it shortly.
Great. Thank you. Well, that's encouraging. That at least gets us something in terms of entertainment, which is much appreciated. And I'm desperately going to miss Supercrawl. It's one of the highlight events of the year for sure. Thank you. Keenan Loomis, Chamber of Commerce, Hamilton. Keenan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a great honor to be asked to serve here and to serve with all of you. I've said many times in my webcast, I wouldn't want to be quarantined anywhere else than in Hamilton. It's a great community and representative of all of the great people around this table. So I look forward to working with you all. The Hamilton Chamber of Commerce has been the voice of business in Hamilton for 175 years. This is not obviously how we expected to be celebrating our 175th anniversary, but I think it's probably as good a commemoration as any, as associations are more important in bad times than they are in good. And I can only imagine all of the ups and downs in Hamilton's history that this association has helped guide the business community through. Today, we represent over 1,000 businesses and organizations in this community. Many of you sitting around the table are members of the Chamber. And we've been happy to channel your voice to City Hall, Queen's Park and to Parliament Hill through this pandemic. We have worked really hard to provide immediate resources to our members. A whole deluge of information is coming from all three levels of government. And we worked hard to synthesize that, working with the city to create the COVID-19 microsite off of our hamiltonchamber.ca website, and as well to conduct a webcast series. We have now done 26 episodes, and every single one of them have focused on a really important issue to help our businesses through this time. So I think it's important for us to, as a group, to provide immediate resources to the business community. They're going to be navigating a lot of new rules and regulations as they open, and we have to be responsive to that and facilitate interaction with public health, for example. And we have to be quick to respond to the needs and requests of the businesses. And already City Council has done so in responding to the restaurant community and saying, how can we expand our patios out into public spaces? I think that's exactly the type of innovative thinking that we need to bring to this and be quick to act. And finally, I think it's important as well that we have a conversation around some of the really exciting opportunities that we have as a community. We've come a long way in the last 10 years, and that's what's most, I think, disheartening about this, is that it's set us back a long time, especially, the restaurant and hospitality industry, which was it was at the forefront of our changing image over the last 10 years. So obviously every community is going through the same thing, and I think there's a lot we can do in terms of adopting best practices and seeking to endeavor to create our own best practices here as a group. But I think it's important that we also take up some of the conversations that were happening prior to COVID as well, the important investments that are going to be need to be made in order to stimulate our economy. So we're working as an organization. Advocacy and policy work is part of our bread and butter. And we're creating a document, again, funneling all the voices of our members as recommendations, both short-term and long-term. And I hope to be able to present that to the group sometime very soon, maybe as soon as next week. So looking forward to serve, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Keenan. Thank you for your ongoing work. And, sharing information has been key through all of this, from city, from chamber, from, wherever we need to get access to. So thank you for that ongoing work. And that's going to be with us for quite some time. I think an informed public has been our best ally so far, and that isn't going to change anytime soon. Patty Hall, Executive Director of Stony Creek Chamber. Did you manage to get back on the line?
Yes,
Maybe not. Yes, Patty? Okay. Go ahead, Patty.
Patty Hall from the Stony Creek Chamber of Commerce. So I'm very representing our chamber on this task force and working with all of you. I'm not going to continue on because a lot of what Keenan said also resides with us here in Stony Creek. Just the one thing I would make note of is really we're starting to see now how this is affecting our members. Not so much in April and May, but we're really seeing it now. I have one member that's been open for 12 years, and they've just announced they're closing June 30th. I've got another one that closed their entire location in Stony Creek. Another gentleman decided to retire. We had our Tim Hortons in the downtown BIA just close. And another company just closed and decided she's going to work from home. So there's 4 people out of work that worked for her. So I just think that now we are starting to see the impacts of what we were fearing. And, anything that we can do to help, relieve some of that stress on these people. And if there's ways we can help, I think that it's very critical at this point. But thank you very much.
Okay, Patty, thank you very much. I'm going to turn to Brian Lovers, General Manager of the Courtyard by Marriott.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the invitation to be on this task force with all these great people. Certainly, as just been mentioned, the hospitality and hotel industry has taken a real drastic hit, and business really kind of dried up overnight back in March, and when we first were seeing results, we thought this might be short term, and original forecasts where we might have a quiet summer and then start bouncing back in the fall and maybe fourth quarter back to normal. And now we're seeing, maybe 2 years from now where we might see, business levels starting to come back up or be where they were previously. So certainly in a tough time, we had to make the difficult decision to lay off 85 to 90% of our associates. We did decide to keep our doors open, and I do actually oversee a number of hotels in the GTA as well. So it's no different here in Hamilton than it is most places across our country. So certainly a tough time in the hotel industry. Hospitality, we certainly depend on these festivals and events and concerts and the CCMAs, and hopefully we will see the Grey Cup next year. These are crucial pieces to our business, and not to mention Hamilton seems to always be a real hub of weddings and group travel that way. And we don't know what the new wedding looks like in the future with numbers and stuff like that. So it really is changing our future outlook, and as companies, we're looking to how do we change our business model, and what do cleaning procedures look in hotels and all that kind of stuff. How do we make sure that our guests can come back to Hamilton and feel safe in our hotels and enjoy their stay and this great city? So lots of things to look for in the future, and happy to be part of this committee and discuss ideas on how we can make that better for everybody.
Thank you, Brian. Particularly hard hit that like all industries, but certainly, I mean, virtually, do you have people coming into your hotels at this point, and how are they managing? How are you managing that?
We have very few. I mean, we are keeping the doors open. When I say few, we're 5 or 6 rooms a night. There are people who are still coming from out of town, and Hamilton Health Sciences, are starting to get back going again with some surgeries and stuff like that. So there are people coming from out of town for medical care. There are people who just want to get out of their house after being quarantined for some time and just want to get away. Very, very small numbers though. And we're working pretty much just with our leadership team at the hotel, and very small staff, but
Right.
doing what we can to take care of them. So.
Speaking of pivots, I understand that because of people being shuttered at home, that the divorce rate's going to go up significantly. So maybe you should start celebrating divorces rather than weddings and pivot to that. Just kidding. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But that's certainly been the indicator. I think that they've heard from China that the divorce rate is up 25%. Who knew?
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you, Brian, for all you're doing, and certainly we look forward to some feedback going forward. I'm going to ask a little later about personal protective equipment and how you're all managing that space, because that seems to be an area that we're all struggling with, and wonder if there isn't a better way of doing that. But I'll get back to that question a little later. Anthony Marco, President of Hamilton District Labor Council, and I thank you, Anthony, for your support of the city's ask to federal and provincial governments for our kind of glooming shortfall as well. And I would encourage other organizations to do the same. I think one of our broad fiscal challenge for the city is the looming deficit that is coming at us that we do not have an answer for as yet, although we'll find a way. But support for other levels of government to help the municipal sector helps all of you, quite frankly. So if you can see yourself, offering up a letter of support to the Prime Minister and the Premier and others, MPs and MPPs, that would be very helpful. And thank you for that, Anthony.
Sure. My name is Anthony Marco. I'm president of the Hamilton Labor Council. Thanks for being invited to serve on the task force. So the Labor Council, for those of you who don't know, represents about 50,000 affiliate members across the Hamilton area, which is a pretty sizable number when it comes to our workforce. It certainly doesn't include everybody, but it largely includes, for the most part right now, who are unionized workforces across the city. So we are chartered by the CLC, which is the Canadian Labour Congress. We're also part of the Ontario Federation of Labour. And right now, I also currently sit as a vice president on the Canadian Labour Congress, representing the Ontario region of Labour Councils. So I get to represent all of the Labour Councils across the province at the CLC. As such, over the past couple of months, I've been on video conferences with all levels of government, and that's what prompted some of the content in the letter that we forwarded on to City Council just recently. I will say that I see my primary role here as trying to bring a worker's lens to a lot of the discussions that happen here, and that's not to say that everyone on this call isn't considering that at some level, but I also know that there are a lot of other things that if you're running a business, you are considering. You're considering supply chains and all of that stuff. My main focus when I come here, and I'm being completely transparent about it, is how do we make sure that workers are able to not only return to work, but return to work safely, that they have the ability and the wherewithal to get to work back and forth as easily as they did in the past, or maybe even easier, maybe even more accessible. And how do we make sure that their families are being taken care of so that they don't have to miss shifts or call in sick? I know that those are kind of some of the outlier things that we think about, but I think it comes down to the main idea that for the most part, that working class people in this city and all cities are the key economic driver of what happens with our economy. And it's not just the ability to have jobs, but being able to subsist and thrive within the culture of having working families. And so that's part of the lens that I'm going to hopefully bring to this. As working people in this city, we are perhaps the most intersectional group, representing people from all backgrounds, all ages. We know that our work isn't just going to end at unionized employees. One of the tasks that we've committed to doing is to reaching out to a lot of the connections that we have with non-unionized employees as well, and we have ongoing connections with them. So we're going to make sure that part of the information that we bring to this task force is trying to, as best as possible, not just represent the affiliate members that we have, but to talk to as many non-unionized employees as well at all levels of business, corporations, government institutions, and try and bring back some of their concerns to the process as it's going forward. So we want to make sure that as this all kickstarts, that ultimately everyone feels good about going back to work. Everyone feels like they're going back to what they consider to be decent work. And maybe that a little bit of the perception gets changed about people who were generally thought of as having meaningless jobs in the past and who are now considered essential workers. How do we maybe start to redefine and reconsider what some of the contributions that those workers make, not only during a pandemic, but on a day-to-day basis? So thank you, everybody, and I look forward to participating.
Thank you, Anthony. And in my view, economic recovery is all about employment, all about getting people back to work, whatever sector it is, or whatever level of employment is, and obviously meaningful, respectful work is a foundation of all of that. So thank you, Marco, Anthony. Kim Martin, Executive Director of the Social Planning and Research Council. Kim, there you are.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity to serve on this task force and committee. The Social Planning and Research Council has been in Hamilton for the last 54 years, and our focus has been on social planning and research so that we focus on issues of poverty, housing and homelessness, and equity issues. And we bring the lens, certainly in terms of recovery, to looking at issues of how does this affect us and how can we do this in a way that is equitable for all. So much of our research focuses on communities that are either historically and presently also marginalized. And that is certainly a lens that I hope to bring to this committee in terms of how do we create that opening for our economy without leaving anyone behind. My background is in social work, as well as I have worked as an entrepreneur as well, both inside and outside of Canada. And just pleased to be joining this great collaborative of individuals that are committed to helping Hamilton move forward.
Great. Thank you very much, Kim, and delighted to have you with us. I'm sure your wealth of knowledge in the social planning research area is going to be helpful in terms of how we move this forward. So thank you so very much for participating. Got Rob McCann, founder of Clear Cable Networks and Intelligent Community Champion. Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being a part of this team together. Our company, Clear Cable, builds broadband for communities of all sizes right across this country. And dare I say that amid the pandemic, our business and that of our peers has actually accelerated as everyone scrambles to get online. But we also own and operate the Hamilton Technology Center, which is home to 20 different technology companies who are all engaged in various developments. I think the perspective that I hope to bring is enough to help everybody's individual sectors, because I think ICT is going to be important for moving forward. Thank you.
Totally. You know what? And yesterday morning, we were trying to get our virtual council meeting going. I think the lightning storm kind of messed up the entire broadband network, and so we had to defer for a couple of hours to sort things out. So, you know what? Connectivity today it has been demonstrated, not even on a personal level, to be a godsend for families connecting and now for communities connecting in terms of how we reach each other and are able to kind of still get together virtually, continue to talk about these very, very important issues. In the absence of that, we'd all be running blind, I think. And so we need our broadband, working, and our digital connections working. And certainly those that are in that space can help us a great deal, ensuring where this is all going and how we can keep it going in terms of the investments that need to be made to make it functional for the future. So thank you, Rob. Very important sector. I'm going to go to Ron. Ron, you've had your say. I'm not going to give you two opportunities. Bob Monroe, producer, director, VFX, supervisor, Blacktop Recess. Bob?
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for the invitation to be on this task force. So I am here representing film and television. For the most part, most people in Hamilton who work in the film and television sector are kind of individuals. They might have their own, personal corporation, but we have about 10,000 people in Hamilton working in film and television. And it's a bit of a dichotomy. The vast majority work in production, but a smaller group work in post-production. Those in post-production have not yet been affected by this. They're still working animation companies like Pipeline Studios. They're working out of their homes. Equipment was mobilized, pipelines were restructured, and people were able to actually set up at home and really hit the ground running. I've enjoyed the same thing. I'm doing a TV show for a U.S. network that I'm actually literally finishing in my basement on my in my house in Ancaster on Book Road. Thankfully, I've got fiber optic connectivity, so that really helps. So those of us that are also in the post side, we've been okay. But those that are in production, it's gone away. In the snap of a finger, it's gone away. Things will start to get better very soon, but the protocols that are being put into place are everybody's just testing the waters right now. Are people going to wear colored badges on set, meaning you can only go to one area, you can't go to another, you can't be on set at this time, you have to be on set at this time. COVID-19 teams for production, taking people's temperatures all the time. All that kind of thing is being put into place right now. But I think where Hamilton is really poised to come out of this in a very positive manner is in terms of technology going forward. We have a no shortage of Oscar winners, Emmy winners, Canadian Screen Award winners living in Hamilton, creative and technically capable people. A lot of people have, and as you very well know, have tested the waters about building a studio here. And I think we have to think about building a different type of studio, a virtual production studio, or thinking about production itself in a different way. And that, I think, again, we've got the talent in the city to be able to put into motion those very things. So I'm looking forward to being on this committee. I'm looking forward to bringing the film and television side of things to it. And I know that given the august and certainly successful group of people that we have together, the outcome is going to be, I think, very good for the city. The way that this task force has been put together. But the one thing that I definitely want at the very end of it is a jacket that has task force emblazoned on the back, because I think that's cool.
I think that'd be nice. Yeah. I'm going to process that for a minute and think of the joke that I might have in my head. But in any event, I think this is going to be an important group, and I'm really quite delighted to hear all the different perspectives of how this is impacting you. I mean, if anyone thinks this is a meeting that isn't most enjoyable, to hear actual impacts of all of the sectors that we're dealing with in our community, and in a city that was actually on a very good positive curve, coming into this. How do we get back to that with all of the kind of sectors, film and music, being a part of, and restaurant scene, the largest fastest growing restaurant scene in North America. All of those building blocks were very much there. How do we can take it to the next level, adjusting to the kind of COVID circumstance? And I know, no doubt, the film industry, in terms of production, I can only imagine what kind of steps you might have to go through to actually put a film together today with all of the COVID physical separation that's currently in place. I think it sounds like a nightmare. I bet you it's doable in one manner or another. And I think you're right. We've got very smart people that can figure this out. Thanks, Bob, for your participation and your work in our city. Thank you. Matteo Patricelli, Executive Director of Flamborough Chamber of Commerce. Matteo.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thank you for the invitation to be part of this group. Very much look forward to it. Second, I have to say right off the top, I have to second Bob Monroe's suggestion of the jacket with the task force logo, but not from public funds, of course. I'm happy to personally donate my share of that one.
I'll kick in for that. Yeah.
I don't. There's no need for me to reiterate the Chamber of Commerce perspective. My two colleagues, Hamilton Stony Creek, have already addressed that. Needless just to say, for those that don't know, the Flamborough Chamber of Commerce has been around for about 40 years, representing all of Flamborough, which is a very large part of Hamilton, with a very mixed demographic of types of businesses, and I hope to represent them well and bring their perspectives and needs to this group. That being said, if Mayor still wants to, you talked about ideas. I look forward to this group really talking about the opportunities we have in making some smart and strategic decisions for, as the mandate is, for the long-term success. Examples like Mr. Mayor and staff probably have already heard. A couple days ago, Montreal released a report where it was recommended that they pursue lobbying to temporarily suspend the balanced budget rules, which would give them the ability to make the investments and not have to worry about having a balanced budget, which is the current necessity. In addition to provincial and federal aid, even things like coming up with special bonds to allow citizens to invest directly in the community, things that we can try to do to avoid raising taxes, but allow us to continue to invest in the community. So I look forward to this group, and maybe even engaging some other experts, economists, things like that can help us understand what the impacts of our decisions might make in the long run. But overall, I'm very excited to be part of this group, and I thank you again.
Thank you, Matteo. And I can tell you that the mayors across the province have rejected the notion of allowing municipalities to run deficits. I think it's more problematic. I think it just exacerbates the problem down the road. I'm not sure that's particularly helpful. But bonds and other ideas in terms of how monies could be raised is certainly an option that can be looked at for sure. I don't think council's taken a position on that. I think if you allow municipalities to run deficits, you're just adding a whole new layer of indebtedness that still has to be paid for. It just doesn't help over the long run. So personally, I'm against that part. But creative ideas on how we can raise funds and getting support from other levels of government is going to be critically important going forward. No question about it. I'm going to turn to Kathy Puckering. Kathy, President and CEO of our Hamilton International Airport. Kathy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, reiterating everybody else's comments, thank you for my invitation to the task force. So my background over the past 20 years has been working with my team to grow the airport, which is actually owned by the city of Hamilton. So we definitely were going into a great year for 2020, which has definitely come to a halt. It's good to note that the revenue opportunities that we have at Hamilton Airport actually deal with the passenger traffic that we have, the cargo traffic, and as well as the investment that we have on the property with our tenants that provide services to all of our carriers, provide maintenance and repair facilities, charter operations, and just general support for all the airlines that are operating here. So I actually am here to represent all the employers that are on premise that are supporting over 3,500 jobs that actually are a result of the airport operations here in Hamilton. And obviously, you know, we're impacted both positively and negatively with the economic, you know, impacts to COVID-19. One of the things that we, you know, really want to focus on right now is the cargo operations. And while we're seeing, you know, the need for critical goods moving in and out of the airport, we are receiving about 80% of the inbound PPE coming into Canada right here in Hamilton, you know, at our warehouse. But we're also, you know, providing those online, and the growth or the surge in e-commerce that's in the market right now as people are staying at home and finding different ways to actually, you know, purchase what they need to. But what comes along with that, you know, is the uncertainties of the protection of the workers and the need to have PPE, and how are they actually working in a new environment, and minimize any interruptions to the supply chain. So one of the priorities that when representing our cargo partners is how do we ensure that we maintain the capacity we have today, you know, grow it for tomorrow, and what are the abilities to grow that to ensure, you know, Hamilton, Ontario, and the country are not in the situations that we've all been reading about over the past few years. So just shifting a little bit now into the passenger area, and I won't reiterate what's been said, but Hamilton is very much a leisure market for passenger traffic, and that's people that want to travel to visit family or friends, heavily relying on the tourism and the hospitality industry. So us, you know, no different than any other airport, or, you know, what we heard earlier today from Matt and from Brian, it's been decimated, the passenger activity, and it's going to take a long time to come back. Aviation has been hit hard. We have had shocks, you know, in the past, and we will recover. We are resilient, but what we know is it's going to be different. And our role and our partners' role will be, how do you increase that confidence or that sense of comfort to travelers that it is okay to travel. And you know, we provide a facility or an experience here where you're traveling through the city's public facility, but at the end of the day, they are getting on a plane. So what changes are going to happen, you know, similar to what happened after 9/11, you know, regulations will change, policies and procedures will change, and we're actively working with the aviation industry, our airline partners, and with all levels of government to understand what that looks like going forward. But we need to restore that confidence. I'm very, you know, happy to be part of this group as we all work together, because together we will be stronger, and we will come up with some really good solutions. But until then, you know, before the travel industry actually returns, there needs to be a vaccination, or there needs to be a proven treatment for COVID-19. The reality is, you know, that's going to take quite some time, but we are in it for the long haul, and we know it will recover. So again, thank you to this group for forming, and I look forward to the outcomes of these sessions.
Thank you, Kathy. And can you share with us that you're pretty much a hub for a lot of the PPE that's coming into the country and getting redistributed, are you not, through Cargojet and Air Canada?
We are. So what I should have mentioned earlier is we are Canada's largest domestic overnight express cargo airport, and we have almost every cargo operator operating here today. Cargojet secured a government contract earlier in the pandemic, and they're moving product daily from Asia into Canada. 80% of those goods are inbound into Hamilton before redistribution or before being redistributed to other areas within the country. DHL as well have increased their capacity in Hamilton. They're not only building a 230,000 square foot facility to add or quadruple their capacity in Hamilton and create its international gateway, but about a month ago, they put on a new route coming directly from Heathrow into Hamilton, bringing inbound products, again, their normal operations for courier and goods, but increasing the PPE, medical supplies, test kits, things of that nature that are directly related to the pandemic. But what we're hopeful for is the trends that we're seeing right now, while they were created by the pandemic, and not only the surge in e-commerce, is these trends and these habits will continue. And that will just, further solidify Hamilton's role, not only in the region and the province, but in the country.
Yeah. So on that, so can you not reserve a couple of skids of PPE for us as they come flying through the airport, Kathy? Never mind. Don't answer that question. Same thing I asked our staff, and I got a big laugh. I got a big laugh, or nervous laugh. I think is probably the right equation for that. But in any event, we'll talk about PPE in a little bit later. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Ty Shattuck, Chair in Synapse Life Sciences Consortium, McMaster Innovation Park. Ty.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for inviting me to this this task force. I'm excited to be part of it. So as the introduction said, I'm going to wear a couple hats and represent a couple groups. One is the chair is the Synapse Life Science Consortium. I think you know that life sciences, whether that's on the biology side, tracking down the viruses, or on the manufacturing side, say for example, of PPE, is a big and growing component of the local economy. I'm also the CEO of McMaster Innovation Park, where we are home for more than 800 full-time employees in a variety of companies. And so what I would say as it relates to COVID, MIP itself and the companies that we're home to have obviously been impacted by COVID. It's a little bit of a mixed bag. Those companies that seem to have been able to pivot, today's favorite word, toward something COVID related actually seem to be thriving somewhat. So we're actually seeing an uptick in stuff. Those companies that are further away from the COVID response, it is not nearly as rosy. I think as everybody trying to navigate the various support programs the government offers and trying to figure out how long the situation will last, remain a number of challenging. I'd say anecdotally, things are better than we anticipated kind of at the outset of the pandemic. I would say there's hope that if you look at the prowess, the research prowess, whether it in life sciences, whether it's in MAC or the various hospitals or Mohawk, and the availability of talent, I think in the long run it's an opportunity for us to leverage that ability moving forward. Exactly how we're going to do that, I think we all have to figure that out. I think one thing that I would bring to the table that may not be as relevant to other groups is that we have a lot of companies that are dependent upon capital. Whether the form of venture capital or private equity capital, and a lot of that capital is not locally sourced. It's from other parts of Canada and frankly other parts of the world. And so we're seeing a retrenchment of investment capital as in financiers are trying to figure out what the future looks like, and that's flowing downhill to affect our companies, and that's well outside of our sphere of influence. And so that's creating an additional level of anxiety within the companies, wondering if they're going to have access to the capital that they need to continue to go forward. But overall, I'd say the life sciences, both on the biology side and on the manufacturing side, is an opportunity that if we do our jobs properly, I think we can leverage going forward and accelerate what was already a growing component of the economy.
Great. Thank you, Ty. And it's an important sector. I'm always amazed with the amount of work that's going on in life sciences in the city of Hamilton. I think most people don't really appreciate the breadth and width of the research that's going on and the impact it's having not only locally but globally. So lots of good work and opportunity there in terms of employment for sure, and hopefully, if they're the creator of the vaccine, eureka. What a eureka moment would that be? But the whole world's working on it, it seems, and certainly that's a good thing. So that, in my mind, certainly accelerates our ability to get to the treatment or vaccine stage. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Hamilton's institutions and companies are absolutely playing at a global stage at this point. So I think that's a really good thing that we should be proud of, and that we should try to figure out how do we leverage it into a more impactful economic component.
Good points. Thank you. Thank you, Ty. Thanks for participating. Drew Spoolster is on the line, chair of the Agricultural Rural Affairs Committee. And you'll know that some 65% of our land mass is agricultural. It's a big agri-business that some people might, not necessarily think of as a huge employer, but in fact, it very much is. And Drew, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and good morning, everyone. Sorry I couldn't join you via video, but I'm out in the field right now, so my phone battery is holding out for now as we speak. So,
are you actually in a machine doing work while you're doing this?
I absolutely am. I just actually stopped the sprayer for 5 minutes here while I speak, and I can concentrate on this.
That is multitasking ultimate. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, we do farm here in Binbrook. I farm with my family. We have a dairy and grain operation, and my wife and I raise Clydesdale horses. I do chair, as was said, the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Advisory Committee in my second term as chair. So we have some fun with that. And I do sit on the Ontario Federation of Agriculture Board as a representative for Hamilton, Halton, and Niagara. And I am elected there as the fourth executive member. So the OFA is the largest lobby organization in the province for farmers, and we represent 38,000 farm family members right across Ontario. The agriculture and food world has not escaped any of the effects of COVID-19. Certainly, we've been affected greatly, and a lot of our commodities have been affected with the loss of the food service market. I know, particularly in the dairy industry, I'm directly involved with it, so I'm aware of it. But the retail market, so grocery stores and that, the market's up about 10%, but our food service market, we've lost over 50 to 60% of that market. So that's had a huge effect on supplies and supply and demand and how things are moved across the system.
By food service, you mean restaurants? Obviously, that's the other sector that you're talking about. Yeah, right. Okay.
That's right. Yeah. So food processing sector, I think everybody's probably heard a lot of the challenges in the news with health and absenteeism and maintaining a workforce and high production standards. So we're obviously well connected with the food processing sector as our main market for our products, and they've seen some support for personal protective equipment, and we're grateful for that and for support that has gone that way. Mm-hmm. The ag and food the agriculture sector specifically has seen limited support, really from the federal government, and farmers across the country right now are facing incredible market uncertainty, both here with our domestic markets as well as export markets. With this, of course, being a global issue, nobody's really sure what the demand is going to be for commodities once we get through this. So some of the funding that's been announced was actually previously committed funding for agri-insurance programs. And many of our members and farmers across the province haven't been eligible for a number of the programs that have come out from the federal government. Some of the wage programs and the emergency business account program are just not eligible because farmers, in some cases, don't hire a lot of employees. Family farms are run by the family, so they don't maybe meet some of the requirements. There's also been, as you've heard in the news, challenges with temporary foreign workers. First, with getting them here, that has subsided. I think over 80% of our normal workforce has arrived here in Canada, and we're happy for that. Now we're having some challenges because of because of conditions, we do obviously the best we can with housing migrant workers, but conditions are obviously different than what most people live in when it comes to bunkhouses and things like that. And these workers are working in close proximity to one another. So the virus, if it happens to get into an agriculture operation, can spread quickly. And we have recently heard of a few, not here in Hamilton, but in Niagara and Norfolk, a few cases where there's been outbreaks on farms. So we're monitoring those things closely. With changes in how we've done business and doing business in these times, we've also certainly seen a divide that's been talked about before, but in broadband and cell coverage, and it's been amplified, the divide between rural and urban parts of Ontario, and that's not any different here in Hamilton. So proper broadband coverage, cell coverage across the rural areas is something we've been advocating for a long time, and now we are really seeing this issue crop up and with different ways of doing business. So I'm happy to be here and happy for the invitation. Thank you very much, and look forward to supporting Jeanette and council however we can through this committee.
Okay, thank you, Drew. Can I just ask, with the percentage of grocery store business as opposed to service business, is it 50%, 60% of your business, or how do you break that down?
I don't have that actual number, but the food service business is a very significant part of the operation, right. And when that just basically is eliminated, there's a number of processes where, specifically in the milk business, there are streams where milk goes through processing specifically for the food service business. The other side goes to retail, and when there's a big shift in demand, it takes time to move those things around. So we did see a period around Easter where we had to actually dump some milk in the province because there was just no home for it, and you can't turn off the tap.
Yeah, the cows keep producing, no question. Okay, Drew, thank you very much for your participation. We'll let you get back to your work, but stay tuned. Judy Travis, Executive Director of the Workforce Planning Hamilton. Judy, still with us, I trust?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think nobody can see my face because and I'm not trying to go incognito here, but my video isn't working today. So Workforce Planning Hamilton has been in Hamilton for 23 years. We do labor market planning, workforce development activities. We're funded by the provincial government to do that work. We look at the statistical evidence to see what's going on in the labor market. And of course, we're exceptionally concerned when we look at the numbers these days and sort of wonder what lies ahead for Hamilton. We work with both with the supply side, so looking at job seekers and who's available in our labor market, and what kinds of skills they have and what kinds of skills they need to work in Hamilton, and where the opportunities are in Hamilton, what kinds of jobs are available. And then we also try to understand what employers are looking for, what kinds of skills are in greatest demand, and so on and so forth. So we're sort of watching very carefully right now, looking at all the data as it comes in, but also, we participated in the impact survey that Norm presented earlier today, and we're very interested in, how that's going to impact on, all the loss of revenue and even the things around PPE and things like that. How's that going to impact the workforce? So, that's what we're about. And we're very, I suppose the one thing I am concerned about is that there will be quite a number of displaced workers as a result of all of this. And how do we redirect them, transition them into the new labor market that's going to emerge, post-pandemic or even during the pandemic? And, the who's hiring in Hamilton during COVID is about trying to help employers right now, because there are labor market needs right now. And sometimes the job seekers are not thinking about that. They're perhaps sitting home and resting, and enjoying their CERB benefits and things like that, and waiting to see what happens. But there are needs out there right now. So we're trying to keep our finger on that as well. So that's what we're at, and we're really happy to support in any way we can in terms of workforce development and activities.
Thank you, Judy. An awful lot of data gets produced through your agency, and certainly that data is going to be very important as we move forward on all of this. So I think whatever you can share on an ongoing basis with us all would be great. I'm reminded that we should share with all of you the Conference Board of Canada's latest assessment on the Hamilton economy. I think I'm going to ask our staff to send that to you. It puts a bit of a frame from their perspective on what they see happening in our local economy going into the future. So it'll be helpful information. Henry Weigel, Director of Government Relations, Government and Trade Relations for ArcelorMittal Dofasco. We heard from you earlier, but formally now, Henry, how are things going at ArcelorMittal Dofasco?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Is my microphone working better than before?
It's working. I can hear it just fine right now.
Okay, perfect.
Probably the closer you hold it to your mouth, the better, but.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
So again, thank you very much for the invitation to the task force. I've been at Dofasco. I call it Dofasco. I omit the ArcelorMittal.
So do I.
Yes, for 34 years.
And you might as well spit out the slogan because that's your hallmark.
I might as well right now. So our product is steel, our strength is people, and our home is proudly Hamilton.
One of the most brilliant slogans ever created for any company industry, I must say.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, I've been here 34 years. The last 16 have been in government affairs, working with provincial, federal, and municipal governments. I'm representing the manufacturing sector here on this task force, who I also know is very proud to be in Hamilton. And I just wanted to share some thoughts of how COVID has impacted Dofasco as it relates to how it more broadly is impacting the manufacturing sector. So Dofasco is the city's largest private sector employer. We have approximately 5,000 people directly working in our facilities. And thankfully for COVID, the steel industry was deemed an essential service. Now that's in the context of that demand for steel more or less in the second quarter fell off the cliff, not just in Canada, North America, but globally, because this is a global situation. Here in Canada, we saw significant reductions in demand for steel from the auto industry. As we know, plants have been shuttered from construction, where a lot of that effort was minimized. The energy sector, which is a huge consumer of steel, as we all know, even before COVID, was in big trouble in Canada, and COVID has furthered that problem. The one bright spot, and depending on how we look at it, was in food cans and food processing. Dofasco is Canada's only producer of tin plate, which goes into food cans. So when you go to the grocery store and you buy some beans or whatever, anything in a food can is made from tin plate, that demand has skyrocketed. And primarily because people are now eating more from home and going to the grocery store more, etc. So in terms of how we've been impacted from an employment standpoint, thankfully, we've had to lay off less than 200 people. But the main message here is that without the federal government supports and other supports from the province and from municipality, those numbers would have been magnitude higher. So we really thank the governments for their support on this, and we want to continue the dialogue on how to keep that going, because it could have been a very very bad situation. In terms of how we see some initial thoughts for this task force of how to improve things for the economic recovery, maybe 4 points to just briefly put forward. The first one is, getting people back to work. Our main office, which has approximately 600 people, everyone's working from home, and we're now looking at how to get those people back. The issues of public transportation, how can they get back safely? The issue of childcare, which is a huge enabler for families in this context to be able to come back. And also, would there be any mandated sort of PPEs from the city of Hamilton or otherwise that currently aren't there? How will that whole progression occur? Secondly, in today's context, cash flow is king for businesses. And is the city of Hamilton looking at other things that they've already done that we're very appreciative for, like the deferral of property taxes, water bills, etc.? Is there any potential for extensions of those moving forward, recognizing all of the issues in terms of debt, etc.? Can we work together on some sort of solutions there? Thirdly, demand, right? Consumer demand for steel products, buying cars, buying anything out there. How can we work with the province and the federal government as a municipality in furthering that demand for steel products, other products, manufactured products? And that leads to the fourth item of consumer confidence. We can open all the restaurants we want, we can do all these different things, but if consumer does not just feel confident about spending money or going out, then that's kind of the first step we have to take as a municipality and working with others. So those are a few initial thoughts. Again, thank you for being on the committee, and looking forward to some great things coming out of it. Thank you.
Yeah, very key thoughts, Henry, for sure. I mean, daycare is going to be a critical return to work issue for a lot of people. Currently, an issue for the frontline healthcare workers, and we're providing daycare for them, but it's going to be a much bigger, broader issue. And some of the social challenges that we've faced previously are now just amplified in a very big way. And so a lot of areas are going to have a different kind of attention and focus going forward in terms of the pandemic. And you mentioned PPE. I'll mention PPE again at the end, but my thought around that is we're all struggling with protective equipment issues, and I wonder if there isn't an opportunity to have the city be a kind of a centralized procurement agency that can help facilitate the gathering of on a chargeback basis, some of the PPEs that everyone's going to be scrambling for, especially as more businesses open up. I mean, we're already struggling now in the healthcare sector and trying to make sure that they are properly supplied. But that's taken a lot of PPEs out of the hands of businesses that are ultimately probably also going to need them. So how do we address that? And I'll cover that later. But good thoughts. I appreciate your input, and certainly your manufacturing is a key component of our economy, and so we need to see that continue to flourish. Thank you, Henry. I'm going to turn to Gay Uitang. And Gay, if I misspelled your last name, I'll apologize. But Uitang is what I translated it into. You're the executive director of McMaster Industry Liaison Office. Gay?
That's right, and that's correct how to pronounce it. So thank you.
Okay.
Happy to be part of the task force, and just as my role, I just kind of want to describe where my perspective is coming from. As the director of the Industry Liaison Office, I support the researchers, or my office supports the researchers at the university and the hospitals in sort of connecting with industry and not-for-profit organizations to do research, as well as the commercialization of that research. So licensing that out to companies or helping to create startup companies. As well, I'm currently the acting director for the Forge, which is the startup incubator, which is mostly student-led kind of startup companies. So from that perspective, I'd say with the change that's happened since March, we've all been obviously transferred over to working from home remotely. It's had its challenges, but I think everything's been quite smooth for the most part. And it's also a lot busier actually. Like people are doing more research where they can and spending a lot more time writing papers and doing other things like that from the research side. And then there's a lot of people who I think student-wise are looking at entrepreneurship and startup companies as a sort of viable venue of creating their own job, which was before, but it's still happening right now. I echo Ty's comments about capital being something that's a critical factor. I think from a university perspective, as Ron mentioned, we had to transition quite quickly to teaching online. So the university has like a lot of different aspects to it in terms of teaching, the research side of it, staffing as a whole, because it's a large organization. So I think for the most part, we've been able to keep most people and redeploy people from a workforce perspective. I think the other good thing that's happened with the help from the government, federal and provincial, is sort of student support for students that need jobs in the summer that can then, sort of pay tuition and things like that. The university recently announced that they are going to be online for the fall, and trying to develop ways to actually look at how to still deliver some experiential learning as well as lab courses. So they're still developing that, but I know they've created some studios on campus to actually enable people to create content for online. The other thing the university does is provide summer camps, so student jobs through that. So I think that's been heavily impacted. I know that some of those camps have converted to online and provided sort of free camps online to give, I think, parents a break, which I appreciate as a parent, for a couple hours over the summer, like on a weekly basis. So they've been doing that. And then the last thing that we've done more recently is just a phased return to research on campus. So when everything shut down in the middle of March, essential research was considered part of what was still possible under the Ontario government, but we classified that as essential research related to COVID only. And so, as Ty mentioned, there has been quite a bit of research in that area going on, and people actually changed over from doing research that they were doing on a regular basis, especially in engineering, to converting it to kind of how do we help the automotive and other manufacturing companies change over to PPE, whether it's testing and validating or helping to design that. So we have actually testing services within the university. It's not a certified lab, but they are testing masks to check for breathability and permeability and things like that. So they're following the standards that help those companies then be able to pass those standards or help to design what those standards could be. So that's happening. And we're also working, there is kind of there's a fairly large initiative within engineering to do sort of that design, helping to manufacture face shields, helping to manufacture reagent test kits, because that was a supply issue with the testing, and working with the hospitals closely around that in terms of collaborating as to what is needed in the hospital for PPE and for reagents, and how they can connect with their manufacturing partners that they were previously collaborating with around the PPE side. So all of that's happening. I think one thing I did want to mention to this group is that there's a large number of government programs to help support students with jobs. So helping to fund, like half or partially fund some of those positions. And there's a fairly new one, which I think might be of interest to this group, which is through My Tax, that helps to support businesses in terms of the economic recovery piece. So can we use our business students to work with businesses around Hamilton that can help to define strategies, marketing, like different aspects that they might need. And that is sort of a shared cost where the business would provide 25% of the cost, the university provides 25%, and My Tax provides 50%. So that's not just McMaster students. Obviously, we want to hire McMaster students, but it's kind of a national program that is being rolled out. So I think programs like that, I think, might help with some of the economic recovery we're talking about.
That's great. Thank you, Gay. Thank you for participating. And there's, as I mentioned earlier, a lot going on at MAC. I'm fascinated that the Forge is still now kind of functioning and operating back to kind of the research they were doing before at the Forge.
Not at the Forge. We've been
just as online.
Online. So we've been providing sort of programming and resources online and sort of networking online. So there's been a lot of Zoom meetings through that.
Yep.
We do have one company in particular, Long and Vision, which is doing that gate sort of product that can help detect the temperature. They piloted it at Nations, and they're also piloting it at MIP. And they've had quite a few number of orders around that. So there are like some of the companies we have are actually doing well because they were able to find a product that can meet the need right now.
Yep.
There's a number of products that through the Synapse Consortium are also being kind of evaluated, whether it's like the tracking, that sort of thing as well. And then the other piece I forgot to mention was alongside life sciences and engineering side, we also are working through our social sciences researchers in working with Center of C3I, which is a Center of Arts, and United Way to kind of look at ways of how people are coping and the social aspects of coming out of this as well.
Right, right. Thank you, Gay. Thank you for that information. Thank you for participating. Hopefully, this group there can be some collision of ideas in terms of how things might interact between all of you and how we can help one another through this as well. We do have 3 counselors that are joining us as well. I've kind of reserved them for last because I want to hear from you predominantly. But Councillor Danko, Ward 7 counselor, is with us. Councillor Danko, Ward 8. Is it 7 or 8? 8. Sorry. Councillor Danko. Okay, we have to unmute you. Hang on one second. Either you need to unmute yourself or we need to do it.
There we go.
Okay, you're on.
Yeah, as I was just saying, nobody really wants to hear from me, as I'm really here to listen and learn from everybody else. But I will say I am very proud of our efforts in Hamilton as we've addressed this crisis head on. I think in the early days and up till now, we've just been putting out fires and dealing with the immediate crisis and doing the things that we need to do. And it's really important that now we can take this opportunity to strategically look to the future. So just really quickly, my personal background, I'm a structural engineer. I work in the heavy construction industry, and talking to my colleagues, that whole industry for the most part is still remained essential, and they're still working on all the projects that they had in the pipeline. But looking ahead in the next couple of years, there's so much uncertainty in what's going to follow. And I also have a foot in the creative industries as well. I work as a professional photographer, and talking to that side of our economy that is very much freelance and gig based has just been absolutely decimated by this, but at the same time is very good at online and promotion online and online sales. So kind of uniquely positioned to pivot to a different type of economy. Just thinking about this crisis in general, I think it's really interesting some of the revelations about the systems in our economy that we have in place. In particular, thinking about how important local business is to our city and to our residents, and all of you representing local business and local interests in one way or another. And like we touched on earlier, part-time and gig workers, of course. And as Anthony Marco said, who is an essential worker? I think that's really been laid bare by this crisis. When some of those workers that we didn't pay a whole lot of attention to before have now become heroes and absolutely essential to the function of our city. I think that's really important to pay attention to and think about as we move forward. So like I said, I'm here to listen to all of you. I'm very encouraged by what I've heard so far. Just the diversity around the table is just absolutely fantastic. And at the same, we're always trying to think about the future, and I think there are some opportunities here if we are strategic about what we want our future to look like, to put those systems in place now, which can make Hamilton a much more resilient place and a much more people-friendly place. And I think what we've built on to date puts us in a very fantastic position to move forward with a transition to whatever the new economy is going to look like. So I'm very excited to be a part of it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Nan.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Similarly to Councillor Danko, I'm primarily here to serve and learn and listen. I'm really looking forward to working with all of you around the table in identifying solutions, but more importantly, defining the outcomes that will help lift our city into not only a recovery, not only a rebound, but hopefully be able to set some excellence for our city and create a model coming out of this town through this city in terms of what other cities can lean towards. I think excellence is possible in our recovery model economically, and when we look at it in terms of how it intersects with equitable outcomes and sustainable outcomes, that's when we start delivering in terms of what our city and our residents deserve. Um, I believe fundamentally in multi-sectoral tables like this one, where leaders from different sectors can tackle the wicked problems together. We've demonstrated in terms of how many of you around this table have helped us pivot locally here in terms of our immediate response, but in terms of building our long-term resilience as a city. I think that is the key here, is building back better and also delivering in terms of equitable outcomes and sustainable ones. I'm on the team that wants a jacket, but I don't want it to say task force. I want it to say recover together. So I just going to throw that back out there onto the table. Thank you. Looking forward to working with all of you.
Okay, so far we've got agreement on jacket. We just don't have agreement on name. So we'll work on that. So priority number one: next time you all come back together again, we want to have a name that goes on the back of the jacket. Everybody make a recommendation. I'll supply the jackets. Thank you all for participating. It's been a couple of hours. I'm sure you all have better things to do for the rest of the day. This has been fascinating, I think, in terms of all of us being able to hear what's happening in all of our various sectors. I think that's enormously helpful, and that can lead us to kind of next steps in terms of where we go. The one thing I've kind of focused on a couple of times is personal protective equipment. I think it's going to be a really big issue, and I wonder what you feel about this notion of all of us not necessarily competing for protective equipment, which is actually costly because we're literally all virtually competing to get the same stuff. Is there a way that we can, on that space, collectively do something that will give us better buying power and still get everybody what they need, properly supplied? Or any thoughts on that from anyone? I mean, obviously we're all chasing that. I've mentioned to our staff a couple of times of, could we be the collective procurer that then, obviously we're probably not in a position to offer it up free, but certainly at a reduced cost because we have a better buying power. Be able to give that back to those that need it on a chargeback basis. Does that make any sense to anyone? Feel free to jump in. They take that as a no.
I'd say one thing. I think the idea of consolidated buying would be worthwhile exploring. I wanted to draw attention to something that Gay mentioned, was the Masks and More program that McMaster's Engineering Group put together. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with it, but what they've putting together is an online platform. Think of it as eBay that connects smaller groups that need PPE. So not the hospitals and stuff like that, but probably anybody that's here with local domestic suppliers. So what you've seen is a lot of local companies have pivoted towards generating PPE, but they don't necessarily have the sales channels. And you also have a bunch of new companies that never had to think about PPE. And so this Mask and More program is through a not-for-profit, and it's to connect those groups. So that could be a source as well. So something to throw out.
And is that going to be kind of produced in large volumes, or is it somewhat limited?
I think that's entirely a function of what the local supply chain can support. The notion is, local suppliers that have some ability, this would be it. But once they grow to a certain extent, then I think they would outgrow this platform. I think what we personally saw was in the beginning of the pandemic, you couldn't get PPE if your life depended on it. But some of the supply of it has become a lot more available today. What this masks more is really trying to do is to take care of people that don't have sophisticated supply chains, either those in need or those that are generating PPE. But
Okay.
I think the
Good
volume
thought.
should be pretty significant. It's a function of what the demand is.
So PPE is an issue. Maybe not localizing procurement would obviously be a benefit if we have people employed as a result of that. All the better. So thanks, Ty.
Yeah, I will share with this group what the link is to that site. It's actually going to be live by the end of this week. They're in
Great.
beta testing right now.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you, Keenan.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So I mentioned our COVID-19 microsite that we've created in conjunction with the City of Hamilton, and we've added a list of local PPE suppliers. And you can see that very clearly down the left-hand side of the resource page. Clearly, the procurement of PPE is going to be an added burden for many businesses when they're dealing with all kinds of other things. So I do think there is some advocacy that we can do to higher levels of government in hopes of easing that burden, perhaps, as you suggest, some pooling and doing some mass procurement may help in driving down those costs. So I think that that's a really good idea. But if you're looking for specific, and these are mostly local suppliers, they are on this list, and they do run the gamut between mask producers to there's a couple apps that are available. So one that allows employees to or monitors employees and their spacing and their usage of PPE as well. So a whole range of local suppliers available on that website.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Ron McCurley.
Yeah, I was really going to cover off some of what Keenan talked about, which is there are a number of local suppliers. Burl Oak Technologies, for example, is producing face shields right now, about 10,000 a week, and those are available to the local market if anybody is interested in placing orders. So that's probably a good place to start. The province is also doing some procurement, some mass procurement on the part of colleges. I don't know about universities and hospitals, but I assume there might be opportunities for us to link into some of that as well.
Okay, thank you. Anthony, Marco?
Yeah, the only thing that I would recommend is that we want to exercise some caution on our timelines here, because what we don't know at this point is what the Ministry of Labor is going to say with regards to occupational health and safety by sector. So ultimately, depending on what the jobs could be, you could have a different requirement for each sector as to what level of PPE is going to be required. So I would hate to see us jump into an order that would have us ordering a whole bunch of stuff that ultimately might only be able to be used by certain people, might not be by other people. So I think just a constant awareness and communication with whatever connections we have through the Ministry of Labor would probably be prudent before we commit to some mass ordering.
That'd be absolutely true. Thank you for that. Okay, any other comments on that issue? Okay, so I have two asks of you. One is, we're making overtures to the federal and provincial governments for the municipal sector support. If you can find a way of supporting our effort in doing that, I think that would be very helpful from all of the sectors that are here. And then secondly, the next meeting, I would ask that you come to the next meeting with maybe three of your top issues that you think you're going to need to deal with as we come into recovery. So some thoughts and ideas to bring to the table about what are the major challenges in your sector going to be that then we can either help with or advocate for or kind of move forward on. Is that a reasonable ask? I'm seeing some noddings of heads. Great. Thank you. All right. And then I think this has been a pretty fulsome meeting as it is. So I think we're well introduced. Certainly have a smattering of impacts in the broader community. We're all dealing with anxiety and frustration. I think that's a common theme for sure, and we're all hoping for a better day sooner rather than later. But I think we all also want to be safe in terms of how that happens. And so I think we're kind of all in the same boat in that sector. Is there anything anyone else would like to share before we ask for a motion to adjourn? And then I'll hand it over to Ron McCurley and Terry Johns and our staff to kind of fashion the next agenda and start scheduling some meeting dates. And I think I think this is going to require some time from all of you. You know, I don't think this is necessarily a monthly adventure. It might be a little bit more than that, given the times that we're at and the speed of which may or may not things advance. So I think some reasonable flexibility around that needs to be kind of factored into this. Any other thoughts from anyone before we close out? Mr. Chair, do you have any other thoughts that you wanted to share with your task force that they might want to bring to the next meeting?
Well, I think, thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Mayor. I think as we think about the challenges, we might want to think too about solutions that we've already thought through that we can share with others. You know, there's a lot of creativity among these task force members. A lot of good work's already been done. We're not starting from point zero. A lot of people have already given this a lot of thoughts. So I think to the extent that we can also use this forum to share best practices and start to think about what we've done that might be applicable to other sectors as well is helpful.
Okay. So 3 of those and 3 you know, things that haven't been resolved that you might need help and assistance or advocacy for. How's that?
Thank you.
Okay. Kathy, did I see you wave or nope? It was just saying hello. All right, folks, thank you so very much. I hope you have a great day and upcoming weekend. Thank you for your participation. This is going to be, I think, a very important exercise for us all. And the sharing and learning has been, I think, very helpful for me. Hopefully it's been helpful for you. And we will get back to you shortly on the conference board information that we've promised to send to you. Sorry? Apparently, super efficient staff that we have here. Apparently, you've already got it. So there are, and there's some thought around for the city for bringing some economists in to have a chat about, you know, the future outlook that we might, you know, bring that to this group as well. I think that would be very helpful for that kind of bigger picture look from their perspective as to, you know, where we go from here. So on that note, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Not everybody race to this one. Yes. Moved by Ron McCurley and seconded by Vice Chair Terry Johns. All in favor? Great. Nice seeing you all. Have a great day and look forward to seeing you again soon and stay well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Have a great day.